I'm Lauren. This is Brandon. We've been serving in Austin for about 3 years in the teen ministry, but before that, we were in the teen ministry in Boston, and before that, for a couple years, and before that, we were in Virginia. So when they were coming up with classes to offer for you guys, we both felt very strongly that we'd love to have this class because in conferences and different things we've gone to, we've always ended up meeting people that are like, hey, I just got hired and I don't know what I'm doing. And we've done youth and family for about 7 or 8 years, but we've had that we've gotten the opportunity to kind of start new ministries 3 times. So we've had a lot of practice in getting started in ministry and moving to a place and starting fresh. So this is something, that we're passionate about, even helping ministers, but especially young ministers start this journey. So we're really excited that you guys are here and that there are, especially for you, new ones, joining the family.
Yeah, and look, we're all working together as a team, and I think especially whether it's youth ministry in terms of just children's ministry or teen ministry, whatever it is, and hopefully we're doing more to link those two together. This is a very, very going to be just a very practical class. So obviously we've had a lot of incredible just lessons as a whole. I was just crying for an hour and a half yesterday. I was just it's the longest sustained cry I've had in a long time. But this is going to be very practical because we have found, like Lauren said, that there are often really great intentions. Man, you're great with kids. You really love kids and all these things, but there's not necessarily a game plan or even a pathway. And everybody's situation is going to be different. Your resources are going to be different. The age of your kids are going to be different. What the culture of your church is going to be. So this is not going to be an exact blueprint for your church. But we do think that, between Tina and our experience, even with this will maybe help you to frame where you're going so it doesn't just feel so chaotic all the time. And honestly, a lot of this is we want you guys to feel like you have a foundation where you do not burn out. Because oftentimes and even for us as we were first starting out, when we have known people that they just feel like they're just spinning. Right? You're not actually going anywhere. You're spinning. You're actually putting effort, right? Like when a car is spinning out, the car is moving. The wheel is moving. The engine is going, but it's not going anywhere. And it's just starting to burn tires and people just get frustrated. And I think in a lot of ways, when there's not a very clear plan, especially in the beginning, it is really easy to feel like, man, what am I doing here? I'm just burning out. I can literally smell the burnt rubber, of my life going up in smoke. And we don't want that to be the case for you guys because we are so grateful and we need all of us to be able to really be at our best so that we can continue moving forward. So just giving you a heads up, it's going to be super practical. We're just going to kind of go into it. Hopefully we'll have enough time, and I think we will, for you guys to be able to ask some questions. But like we said, Tina is here as kind of the children's ministry side. We don't really run with that as much. We have our own coordinators, things like that. But I do think it's important since we're about split 50-50 here to be able to, we're just kind of going bar for bar kind of a situation. So to start, one of the first things that I think is really important is clear expectations. Now you may think this, of course, super simple, logical. A basic even. But honestly, we have found that clear expectations are often very, very difficult to find. And unless someone has a mentality of knowing how to really be able to develop people well, that can just kind of, there's so many assumptions that can be made. And that is often where we see pitfalls relationally with whoever you're working with, whether it's a team, whether it's just one evangelist, whether it's your husband or your spouse. Clear expectations are for everybody, right? You got to talk with your spouse. What are the expectations of what this job will do to us and how much time we're going to spend here, right? What are the expectations talking to my boss? Hey, what do you actually think I should be doing?
Using my time.
And on a very practical level, how I'm using my time. How we're using the resources given to us, allocated by the church or volunteers or whatever it may be. And I think this is also very different if you're part-time, if you're full-time paid, or if you're a volunteer. All of those things are very different, but you actually need to have those conversations, no matter what situation you're in. And honestly, I think all three have downfalls when you don't. But definitely being in a place where you have clear expectations of what your job actually is and what people are expecting of you is really important.
Yeah, I think, again, in our experience, it's oftentimes been really difficult for people to really put words to it, because it's easy to just say, like, well, you just love the kids, or you just, like, here's, 40 teenagers, just spend time with them. And especially in the beginning, I think it can be easy to just maybe not want to ask too many questions, or maybe even feel intimidated sometimes, but that it is okay to, like, push and really ask for those clear expectations, because it'll definitely come in handy.
Yeah, and that's in everything, right? I mean, part of this new to ministry is not just how to have a great ministry as a whole. We just came from taking care of yourself with Sajan Sharma right before, and it's like, if you yourself are not taken care of, you cannot then take care of the people you're taking care of, right? So even clear expectations about budgets, about salaries, your own salaries, clear expectations about where things are going in terms of the influence that you'll have. All of those things are really important to have, because if you don't have that clarity, then you will also have that additional burden and stress that will impede your ability to be able to lead effectively.
Yeah. For me, when I got started, I had a lot of, I tend to be the one that asks a lot of questions, but I think that came in handy. To the point that I even needed to know when to ask questions, because there were certain things that eventually leadership would be like, you don't have to get permission for everything you do. Like, we hired you with the expectation that you are qualified for this position. We trust you. And so there's certain things that are like bigger deals. And I'm not saying not to ask for advice. I was asking for permission. So it's good to know, who do I kind of report to? I feel like in working for a church, you don't necessarily have a boss, right? So you have different people that you ask for different things, or a team of people. The elders and evangelists have a meeting periodically, and they kind of pose something for the children's ministry in my case. It's just good to know who to ask and what is not necessary to ask because you've been entrusted with this. So having it took me a little while to get that confidence that, like, they entrusted me with this. I don't have to be like, can I get a new rug in this classroom? They're like, do what you want to do, Tina, it's fine. And I was like, oh, okay, good. I don't have to ask about everything, so that's good. And being on the same page with leadership, just like these were saying, and doing that repeatedly. Don't just ask questions once, ask questions later, reevaluate, make sure you have the same short-term goals, but also long-term goals for your ministry.
The second thing that we think is really important in starting new is discussing and establishing the boundaries that you're going to have between ministry and your personal life. We all know it can be easy, and then especially as the years go by in ministry, for things to kind of get crisscrossed. Is this work? Is this personal? Am I doing this, because of my own relationship with God, or, whatever kind of thing? And the goal for all of us is hopefully to be able to last in ministry. And we have seen in our experience, that it's fairly common that, by year 3, year 4, sometimes people are hitting that burnout. They're hitting that wall of ministry and don't continue. And so establishing clear boundaries is going to be super helpful, because there's always going to be needs all the time with all the families. They're always going to want you to hang out with their kids, or there's always going to be another lesson to write or things like that. But whether it's having a clear Sabbath, for us, it's our Monday. That is our day off. The kids all know we don't get time with them. We don't answer our phones and things like that. Or setting up time, to be able to take care of yourself, take care of your marriage, and creating that schedule of, okay, I have staff this day and I will take meetings these times, but that, maybe 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever it is for your life, I'm not going to answer things. So yeah, that's super important.
Yeah, I think every person has their own things that they're wrestling with, right? And there has been kind of an expectation, especially we felt this just as younger ministers, right? You don't have kids, and you guys are young, so you guys should just go.
You can do everything all the time.
You know, so it's like, you know, you're doing stuff all the way from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., right? And that's just not sustainable. Like for life. Like if somebody, if another person was saying, Apple wants me to work 12 hours every day, your minister, that minister would be like, hey man, that's not okay. You won't be a good husband. You won't be good for your family. All these things, you need to quit that job. And yet we can then put either had been said to us, or we can put that expectation on ourselves, which is the exact opposite of what we're even trying to model. Right. And so I think it actually is incredibly important. And even, you know, I think sometimes we have felt this, right? We don't have kids. And there, you know, can be some things where it's like, well, because you guys don't have kids, you should do these things. And you know, but then there are layers, right? Because then there's that, and then there's, you're not married, you're single, so you can do even more, you know. And so I feel for all the single people who are just like, they're just expected to just do everything, be a part of 4 ministries, go ahead and do your thing, right? And lead all these things. Or if you're married, you're leading a small group as well, and then you got this on top of that. I think we have to be very careful to protect the thing that's most important, which happens to be our relationship with God.
That's right.
Right? Which means, especially when you're starting new, if you don't start with healthy boundaries from the beginning, part of it is people will expect you to be where you're at from the jump. Right? So if you're going off and you're like, I'm working 12 hours a day, and that's how people have expected you to work, because that's the expectation you set for them from the beginning. And then you realize, man, this is really, really difficult. I got to pare back. People are going to be like, what happened? Why aren't you available anymore? It's like, because that probably wasn't good in the first place. But then people are like, it's this shock of kind of the expectations being shifted. You know, Lauren and I, we, you know, moving a lot and a lot of different things, and even taking care of ourselves personally, we had to kind of do this revamping and real, very honest look at our lives to say, hey, what is it that actually is going to be really beneficial for us in the long term? Because we could run really hard for 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10. But is that really what our goal is? And so we literally went hour by hour on a week. We just, you know, on our big whiteboard, it just went Sunday, Saturday. These are all the hours. What are we doing here? How do we make sure that we're being able to fit all of our responsibilities in, but then also not just our work responsibilities, but our marriage, right? And we have realized in a kind of appointment-based system, right? Not in a 9 to 5, you're clocking in with a timesheet and clocking out with a timesheet. You have to be incredibly intentional, right? So if you are not intentional, things will just fall by the wayside. And so I think finding people to even help you walk through that is incredibly important, right? Like, hey, there's this couple that was like, you guys need to go on more dates. And we're like, you know, it's fine. We see each other all the time, right? And this is kind of a potential downfall of working with your spouse, because you think you are spending a lot of time with your spouse, because technically you are.
Physically together in the same
You are
room.
technically physically together doing things that are important and great and fun. But that does not necessarily mean that you are actually together. Similarly, for people who are single, man, I'm around people all the time, but that doesn't mean your needs are getting met in friendship, in intimacy of just being with other people, right, who are not children.
Yeah, peers.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, man, I only spend time with 15-year-olds. That's not good. That's not good.
You need friends.
You need friends. But that's just for adults as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, my struggle has been not necessarily that the church has expected me to put in so many hours, but my expectations for myself had to be lowered, and I had to learn the hard way that I will burn out, and I have burned out and then tried to come back from that burnout. If I try to do everything, I can't do everything well. And it is an investment for me to train others to take things off my plate. And some of that is just wanting control. Like, if I do it, it'll be done really well, but I don't know if these people will do it the way I want to do it. But I cannot do everything. So I have to find ways to delegate. And sometimes that feels like extra work, because if I have to train people, that's going to be more of my time put into training. But ultimately, if I can train them well enough, then they can train the other people too. And it just it's a huge win-win. And it allows people to have the opportunity to serve in a way behind the scenes that sometimes for children's ministry, a lot of times people don't have the schedule or whatever the reason is that they can't necessarily serve a rotation of teaching. but they can do behind the scenes things for me that is a huge help and a weight off of my shoulders. Because I found myself juggling administrative tasks, management. I feel like I was the IT person and the event planner and the PR person, and it was just like, I can't have all of these hats as one person. I lead the children's ministry without my husband. It's just me. Not that he's not supportive, but it's not his job, it's mine. So I had to figure out how to make that work. So use volunteers, ask for help, and sometimes it's hard to do that because you don't know who's willing to help because they're not always coming forward. But if you kind of put out some of the things that would be beneficial for your ministry, you'd be surprised how many people will come out of the woodwork. Of like, I can do that, which is really great. And if you know your strengths and weaknesses, it makes a really big difference too, because you can seek out people that are strong in what you're weak in, and have them teach you, but also have them help with things that are on your plate that just gives you a little bit more time, like you said, for your family. I have 3 kids, so, and yeah, it does take a lot away from your family if you aren't intentional about how you use your time.
And like when I mean intentional, I literally mean intentional in terms of like, this is the 3-hour block in which this thing is going to happen. And we've had to fight for that, like, and really just be like, look, there are going to be times where we're like, man, do we just want to sleep? You know, do we just want to just not do anything? Which it is a big temptation to do, especially when you're just physically tired. But there's an element where you're like, no, like, we're actually going to go outside. We're going to go outside. We're going to go do something fun. And we're going to talk to each other. And that sounds super basic, right? But the intentionality of doing that, whatever you are choosing to do, like, shows what's important to you. And I think especially with something like this, when you're starting and establishing your rhythm of your life, sometimes we can think, oh, it's going to be crazy for just a little bit. No. It will always be this crazy.
I was told that.
Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, and then it'll like slow down. It does never. It will only ramp up. And so if you don't have a solid place to then build off of, it's easier to be like, oh, we can add more than it is to just then have to pare down.
Right.
To pivot now kind of into our third thing about actually getting into the ministry, you've just, been hired, or you're just starting to volunteer. The first thing that, we found is to just take those first 3 to 6 months, and it's okay, like, give yourself time to just immerse yourself and get to know the people that you're with. Don't worry too much about, starting a new program, or I gotta do all this stuff. Like, just, get to know the community that you're working with, talk to parents, get to know the history of the church. Has there been a youth ministry here before? What was it like? What did you guys do? What did you like about it? What were the strengths and weaknesses? Just get to know, the kids you have, and, understand even, what do you guys think? What would you guys like? And I think that even just knowing, sometimes, when you first get hired, you feel that pressure, like, I got to get stuff going now, and there needs to be, like, clear work things that are happening. I think it was nice and helpful for me to hear, like, it's okay to even take that 6 months, like, of just get to know people, just love them, build that relationship with them, before starting to, like, immediately change things or add programs and those kinds of things. Yeah,
I think one of the first things that we did, and we learned to do this as we kept moving places, was we met with every single family. Every single family that we're serving. So obviously we were going to see the kids at midweeks and teen events and all this other. So we met every parent of all the kids that we had, and had, like, kind of and this was during COVID, so things were a little bit different. But we would have done the same thing where we had made appointment slots, and for all the parents in all of our ministry, they made appointment slots, 30 minutes each, I think, for them to just get to know us. So we had probably the same conversation 25 times, but it was important that they knew who we were, and even had a personal thing other than just seeing me preach on Sunday, seeing Lauren sing, whatever it is. It's like, oh, we actually spent the time in those first few months, like Lauren was saying, to literally meet every single parent, to say, hey, we would love to meet with you, and these are the time slots, and they just registered and all of that other stuff. That was Zoom, but you could do it in person. Yeah, we could do it in person. We've talked about kind of doing parent-teacher conference type style things where people just drop in. But that actually is really important, Because even though, like, oh, we've seen each other for, a lot, we see each other every Sunday, that doesn't necessarily mean you have that personal connection. So in terms of, like, that first, and just because maybe you're thinking, man, I'm already 2 years deep, we never did that, I'm in trouble. You can still do that now. You can literally be like, man, I just realized that we want to make sure we have great connections with the people we're serving. So we would love to meet with everybody within the next 2 months for a 30-minute kind of a conversation, right? Every parent, and just talk to them about, hey, how are you feeling about this ministry that I'm helping to serve in? What are some ways that I can help you? What are some ways in which maybe you've been hurt before? I'm not going to take it personally, and what can we do to make things better? And I think that was really helpful for the parents of specifically, right, we're working youth ministry, for the parents to see, wow, okay, these people really care about us and not just the people we're serving, right? And I imagine it's the same thing for children's ministry. Oh, it's not just, the kids themselves, which are great, but actually the parents themselves. And honestly, people will maybe think they have more issues than they actually do. Because then when you actually approach them and be like, what are your issues? They're like, I thought I had a lot. This is my one. And then they kind of forget the rest. At least in our experience, they're just like, oh, I guess maybe there wasn't that many.
Well, and or too, if they see the effort you're making with their kids, it's very, in a sense, easy to kind of win over the parents because they see you're putting in that effort. And even in that parent conversation, asking, like, how do you feel like I could best help your kid? What do you feel like the needs of your kid, are? Right. That means a lot to them.
Which does mean, just on a very, very practical level, for youth ministry particularly, whether you have like a Wednesday midweek and a Saturday or a Friday event, maybe you just keep the schedule that they have had historically for the first few months, and while you are getting to know everyone, and then slowly, after you've gotten to know everybody and give a comprehensive plan, then you can make shifts that you will then have to explain why you're making that shift, right? But then you can make that shift as time goes on, while you're kind of getting to know people and being within that particular rhythm.
Yeah. For me, I scheduled a big roundtable discussion with people who are very involved in our children's ministry, volunteers, previous supervisors, some of which weren't even actively going to be a part of the children's ministry that I was about to kind of launch. It was kind of like, this is what we did. And it was really helpful to get together with this large group of people, including the people who were children's ministry leaders before me, to ask them what has been working and what hasn't been working, or what hasn't been ideal. What kinds of things would you like to see change? But what kinds of things would you really think it was a shame if we changed? Now, on the flip side of that, I want to draw the point that I got a lot of opinions from that roundtable, and most of it was highly beneficial. But I did walk away a little overwhelmed, like, I can't please all of these people. Like, I can't. This person's perspective is opposite of this person. So if I please this one's going to be disappointed. But like I said, I was kind of I went into it like, I'm starting something different, like under new management. Okay, so like this is an opportunity for change. I also came in with the perspective of a parent with 3 kids in the children's ministry. So it was easy for me to get the parents' perspectives because they were my peers. So I was able to gather those in a more natural setting with people that I know and care about. But it was helpful for me to get the perspective of people that had volunteered. And then I had to walk away knowing I can't please everyone. Ultimately, I was hired for this position so I can make the decisions, but I want to be humble enough to get feedback from what other people. Everybody has a different perspective, and they're going to see it differently than the way I'm seeing it. So I want to be open to hearing what could work and what maybe didn't. And then I had to go from there and figure out, what do I want to change? And if you hadn't already figured out, I kind of dreamed too big and was like, I want to change all this stuff. And then I had to realize I have to dial it back. And your last point is very true for me as well. Like, don't feel like you have to change everything all at once. Take it step by step and figure out what's the most important to make changes and what you can change gradually along the way.
Yeah, and I think even, again, going back to clear expectations, sometimes with teens, the church should be excited, oh, cool, we just hired new people, and then it's like, what are you guys doing? You don't seem to be doing anything. You're just hanging out with kids. Like, you can say right off the bat, hey, I'm excited to be here. I'm going to take these first few months and just get to know everyone. And that way, even the parents, it's clear expectations that, like, this is what you're doing right now. They're not just giving contribution and you're doing nothing. Like, there are things you're doing. And then, after, those couple of months, once you feel like you have a good sense of the pulse of the place and the ministry you have, like Tina said, you can kind of start, creating a plan and figuring out what the rhythm of your ministry is going to be.
You want to talk about? So Lauren mainly runs the systems, like legitimately. So that's kind of the division of labor in terms of what we kind of do. Is it's incredibly important to teach and to talk and all these other things, play games and yell. I yell, and she figures out a lot of the plans. And so it is important to figure out what that division of labor looks like with the team that you have. And so for Lauren, she works a lot with the systems in place to then make the thing run, right? So
you probably want to start thinking about, I love some of the stuff we've been talking about, even like the security policies. That's part of like even when you're getting to know the church. Does the church have any kind of policies regarding youth ministry and what might need to be put in place? Is there already a channel of communication to parents? Do I need to just kind of take over a new email, or do I need to create something new? Figuring out, the goals that you have for your ministry, even on the meeting schedule. How have they met in the past and what's working? This is what they've done for midweek, but is it really effective? Or they only meet once a month. Can we do something, change that up? So figuring out how you're going to, run your ministry, establishing that communication with the parents. That might be multiple things. It's a wide range of parents that you'll have. So I use email and we use GroupMe to communicate with the parents. And then also beginning your search for volunteers and teen workers and help that you might need is important to kind of do then. Yeah,
specifically, Lauren uses MailChimp to be able to use just as kind of an easier, actual tool to use to be able to send out information. And then it also gives you some info of who's opening emails, that kind of thing, and making sure that you have everybody in a list. So MailChimp has been really useful for us.
Or Apple iCal, we have a public teen ministry calendar that the parents can sign up to, so it's already in their phones of the calendar. And it's okay too if that system is changing over time. Before it was we're sending out weekly emails with all the info, and then we just found parents didn't look at the emails, and then they'd be texting us anyway. So now really what we found works for us is I just send out one big important email at the beginning of the semester. Here's all our events for the next 3 months of this semester. And then in the GroupMe, I send out the weekly stuff, the day-to-day, because they're getting notifications on their phone and they check that more easily. So that's kind of the system that's worked for us.
Yeah, and all these parents, right, they have kids in sports, things like that. That's how it goes down. All the football schedule for the season, they figure out, they put in their calendar, and they make it happen. In the same way for us, here's 3 months. These are all the events that are happening. Every midweek, every Devo, teen camp, prom, all these things for the next 3 months so that one, it's been there, and two, there is that weekly kind of, hey, this is what's going on for the week that we send out on a weekly basis.
And there's those two types of parents, too. I don't know if that's what you found, is there's the parents that want to know months in advance and they put it in the calendar, and there's the parents that are like, what's happening this week? Which is fine if that's how they operate, but yeah.
Yeah, I already touched on just kind of prioritizing what changes need to be made, but just kind of you have to evaluate different systems in children's ministry, right? So the obvious one is your curriculum working? Is this really what you want to use? We also looked at our check-in system. I, from a parent perspective, did not feel super safe dropping off my kids and knowing who the teachers were. We decided to implement t-shirts for the teachers that are brightly colored, and it's very obvious when you walk in who our volunteers for this rotation are versus who the fellow parents are in the room, and who's supposed to be there and who isn't. I wanted a digital check-in system, and I did some research on that and had to kind of make a push for that with our church. That I felt like that was really important, that we knew we've stopped using clipboards and laminated cards and such. that those systems work in some churches. In our church, I didn't feel like it was working. There were too many flaws in the system, too many ways that kids could slip through the cracks. I'm not saying that happened, but it wasn't going to happen on my watch. So I just felt really strongly that we had a better system in place, better ways to communicate with parents if we needed to reach them, and know about allergies that kids had, which is something that I feel really passionate about from my own experiences and experiences of my friends. So I needed to train the teachers better. I needed to help them to feel equipped. I remember having a conversation saying, I think part of the reason why teachers don't sign up or volunteers don't sign up is because they feel like it's out of their wheelhouse to teach. But if you can give them like the curriculum and the tools and the guidance, then they feel confident that they can teach the kids on Sunday and that they do have gifts to give to these kids. But so many people don't even think about serving in children's ministry because it was too hard the way it was offered to them in the past. They had to do too much. I try to take some of that burden off of the volunteers because, one, I want them to sign up, and two, I want them to come back. I want them to have a good experience as a volunteer so that they will return. Some of my volunteers come back twice in a year, sometimes just once a year, but even that is like a guarantee that I'm going to have people filling those slots. But if I give them this awful experience, or they felt like, wow, that was a long 2 months of teaching those kids, man, I just don't think you'll get return volunteers. So I had to change a lot of those things and evaluate, are they knowledgeable about safety protocols? Are we doing enough when they enter our I don't want to call it a system, but the background check is wonderful, but what else are we teaching the teachers about safety and about, we started having every single volunteer has to take a 30-minute child abuse training and pass a quiz afterwards. I even implemented my own quiz about our policies. I found after months and months of training teachers that I was inundating them with a lot of information, but everyone's human, right? It's easy for you to tune out at some point, or some stuff stuck and some stuff you forgot. And either people were not doing things the way they were asked to be doing them, or they were asking me questions that I had already explained in their training. So I decided to implement a little quiz. It's in Google Quiz. What is it called?
Forms, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, that one, where you can take a little test, and and it sends me the results, and that felt a little harsh at first when I thought about it, but I was like, no, if they want to teach and serve these kids, the kids are important enough for us to make sure that the people teaching them know what they're supposed to be doing in there. So we also really wanted to make our children's ministry more than just about Sunday school classes, and that it felt like a ministry for the families in this stage of life. So trying to establish that children's ministry culture. It takes time, but just setting goals for what your ministry is going to look like and how you're going to pull in those families in that stage and offer parenting classes and resources so that they can really have that, the home front being that important battleground for them, that it's not just that their kids are learning about the Bible at Sunday school class, but that they're carrying those lessons at home as well. But they need to be equipped with that sometimes too.
Yeah, the last point with the last couple minutes we have is just, I think it's tempting to want to know, the top 10 things to do, and there's, books and things that you could read, and that expertise is helpful, but what will really make the difference at the end of the day in your ministry is the relationships that you build with the families. Because once, you have that trust of the parents, it's easier for them to listen when you want to maybe add an event or do something a little bit different. And the same with the kids when it comes to culture building. When you first come in, you're seeing how everything is going. There's probably some great things about the culture and things that you probably want to change. When, once you have that relationship with the kids, you can have those conversations about, how you want the culture to be and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of like, in terms of the focus of what Lauren just said, it's not so much that the expertise is not important, but the expertise will not be effective if you don't have the relationship. And that's actually not a good enough motivating factor for someone to trust you. If that makes sense, right? It's not like, hey, I've been doing this a long time, just trust me. Like that sounds crazy. But especially with kids, right? Like especially with these people that, they love these kids more than us. And so expertise shouldn't be the first move that we kind of use as a tool for helping them understand why they should trust us. Right. But it is relationship. Now, the expertise is incredibly important. You can't just know nothing. But in terms of the actual tool to have that relationship, expertise is not the first or best way to just kind of impose your will. Right, using expertise, which is tempting to do. Hey, I've done this before, whatever. Hey, trust me, this, and it's like you've got to be able to build that trust outside of just your expertise, which could even be very valid. Maybe you have, an MDiv. Maybe you do, have a PhD in educational learning, from in childhood learning. That isn't enough on a relational level to help set culture and have people buy into what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think, too, when it comes to just the expectations for being new in ministry, again, I think there can sometimes feel like a lot of pressure. Okay, I need to get kids studying the Bible, get, disciples, all those things. For our teen ministry, we start in 7th grade. And so that means that we'll have this opportunity to build a relationship with these kids for 6 years, which is a third of their life at that point, like when they graduate.
And we meet with them like twice a week. So we're talking about hours.
Yeah. And so I think that that's something we love about youth ministry, just as a side thing, right? It's not like a 1-point touch on campus for a semester and that's it. Like, this is 6 years of their life. And so, again, in terms of taking care of yourself, having boundaries, all those things, like, this is a long haul. And, of course, like, the goal isn't even to get them baptized anyway at the end. It is, like, creating that safe space and building that relationship with them. So in our experience in coming into ministries and then changing culture and things like that, we found that sometimes it takes like a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years to finally kind of get that ministry to maybe the vision of the culture that you wanted. And that's okay if it takes a long time. And so if you're like feeling frustrated, like it's been 3 months, I don't feel like anything's changing, like sometimes it takes a long time to do those things. Sometimes it takes certain kids just graduating out, and that's okay too. But that it's okay that it's going to take a long time.
And that's kind of, the reality, right, is, we see this with, honestly, like sports teams. Right, culture just doesn't change because one guy came in and suddenly, we win championships now, right? And I think we can have that expectation on ourselves, but then even that's why the first thing we talked about was clear expectations with the people that are talking to you, with your, even your bosses, whatever you want to call it, your ministers, because it's like, hey, if their expectation was, I don't understand why things ain't turned around in 6 months, it's like, okay, we got to have some clear expectations here, and realistic ones, because it will take time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a mixture of having a good relationship with all the kids when they come in the door, that I know their names, which I try, but there's a lot of them, so trying to work on that, but greeting them with the parents. For me, it's more, I'm trying to bridge the gap between the teachers, the volunteers in the classroom, the kids, and the parents, and making sure that the kids help bridge that gap where they're sharing what they're learning in class because we're encouraging it. I shared a little bit about that yesterday with a rewards-based motivation that we use with a big parent wall display where the kids get to like go up and point out to their parents that they know the memory verse and what they were learning today, and if they do that, we have a system in place to reward the kids, but it helps make sure the parents know what the kids are learning so that they can help with that. But I also think it's really important to have support from your church leadership. I have the pleasure of working with one of our elder couples that kind of shepherd over children's ministry, and that's a huge help for me to make sure that I'm getting fed and getting help and having them advocate in the church for children's ministry's behalf, which I think everybody should have, and you should fight for, because it's really worth it.
Cool. Well, we have 1 minute. And honestly,
We'll stay around if you want to come.
and everybody's situation is different, right? Obviously, we can't really answer questions about children's ministry. So I think this actually is probably even helpful just to be able to get more kind of particular things.
Yeah.
But very grateful for you. Hopefully this was helpful and instructional. But yeah, cool.